What do you think pop culture is? Look at the camera the whole time.
Hi.
Should have googled that before I agreed to this.
Pop culture is it's our media, it's all our movies, it's our TV shows, our magazines, our newspapers, our online BuzzFeed articles, everything, and no matter how spoofy or how serious it is, it's our world reflected by the people who want to talk about it.
In order to be considered pop culture, it has to be popular, and in order to be popular, something has to be relatable. To be relatable, it has to reflect something in the real world, and the real world is a dark place.
Keep your head, everyone still. You can make me fall apart, but I won't blame. Keep your head, everyone still. You can make me fall apart, but I won't blame. You won't sleep. You can place your hands on me, then we'll dance.
It's interesting that our pop culture has, in recent years, started to become a very, very dark thing. It's very full of difficult and troubling themes because our society has started to focus more on these difficulties.
Things like depression and anxiety and rape, really heavy stuff that back in the old days you had to go to a counselor for. It's scary to talk about, so when you see it constantly represented in pop culture, it brings those who are isolated in society, it makes them go, hey, people know we exist.
Fuck! Vincent, relax.
There's a clown in my head, and he shits in between my thoughts. And he forces me to do the most inappropriate thing at the most inappropriate moment. So, relaxing is pretty much the one thing I cannot do. Why don't you eat?
What?
My brain's broken, but all you have to do is eat something.
It's not that easy.
Our media, our movies have become darker, there's more violence, there's more themes of mental health issues, because we as a whole society are becoming more comfortable with this whole idea and this ability to delve into the darker sides of our world and how difficult living as a human on Earth can be.
You know what's gonna happen? You're gonna win that Oscar, and you're gonna go up on that stage and give your little speech, and then you're gonna go home. And you're gonna be so miserable you'll wanna kill yourself. And you're gonna have nobody left to stop you.
There's shows like BoJack Horseman.
Hey, it's BoJack! BoJack! No one's gonna be there when I kill myself? Listen to that chanting, Diane. The chanting don't lie. There's gonna be plenty of people around when I kill myself.
That's entirely about a washed up actor who's suicidal and all sorts of shit. And I watched that because, in a sense, it's relatable. It's a completely parallel universe where the main character is a humanoid horse, but it still feels relatable because I guess the content is what I experience in real life. It's dark, the same way that the real world can be.
Young people probably want to look at dark stuff because pop culture acts as that relatable young aunt, when all your other relatives are 60 plus, and then you've got this 30-year-old aunt who is hip and cool and knows what the kids want. but they're also not gonna judge you for growing up your own way. Whereas you have relatives that are stuck in their generation, and then you have this young aunt who's like, hey, look, yeah, it's probably a little weird. I would have gotten smacked for that when I was your age, but you're just growing up, and I'm gonna support you through that. So I guess it's just an outlet.
Being in a band writing lyrics often is very challenging because it gets very personal. It is dark. It's a reflection of the bad things that happen in my life. My mother and her husband got divorced just over a year ago, and everything I wrote for 6 months was all about how that felt. And obviously it didn't feel good. A lot of my lyrics talk about the negative emotions that I feel, because that's an outlet, you know? Having to process that somehow, I turn to writing about it, because for me that's what works. That's what gets it out of my system. And for other people, listening to that is what works.
Well, you're doing fine. There's some people and I who have a really tough time getting through this life, so excuse us while we sing to the sky.
Feeling connected to, feeling like someone can relate to what they're feeling, even if what they experienced when they wrote those lyrics was completely different, can make you feel a lot better about your troubles.
When our television, when our media gives us an opportunity to think about these things, like when it comes to 13 Reasons Why and their depiction of suicide and mental illness, or lack of depiction of mental illness actually, we kind of get to see that point of our society and think about it without having to consciously question.
Bo Burnham does this poem called I Fuck Sluts.
Sluts! I fuck sluts! Sluts get fucked when I fuck sluts, no ifs, ands, and or buts. I fuck sluts! I fuck sluts!
He's got a crush on this girl and he's hurting because she doesn't like him back, so he starts like lashing out and he's like, I fuck sluts! And he goes on about all these different girls he's fucked, but he calls them sluts. And that's a way of like, you know, him coping. And I think Bo Burnham does this in a way that is dark pop culture. He's making jokes about slut shaming, about, you know, sex and all this stuff. It's okay to do that stuff, and it's funny and people watch it. People seek it out on the internet because it's funny. But I think there's that deeper meaning that no one's like first like, I'm gonna look up Bo Burnham so I can come into touch with how I feel in society.
Pages are blank, I know it. Why am I lying to you?
You know, people go, I'm gonna look him up because he's funny. But there is that subconscious like, hey, this is relatable, this is how I get treated, these are words that get thrown at me, or this is how I react in hurtful situations, and this isn't how I should react because, look, people know that it's shitty.
But don't trust these sluts, don't you dare. They'll force you to trust them and love them and care, and then they'll be gone, and then you'll be aware of that hole in your heart that dumb slut left there. Thank you very much. So, he was lashing out with sexist language because he had his heart broken. We all learned something.
Because pop culture can do it in a way that's considered traditionally entertaining, it means that those walls can be broken down and we can start looking and thinking and educating about these topics without having to scare people, you know, with a lecture or a police officer coming in and explaining it. Because people shy away when they are directed to truth front on. But when we are taught these things subtly through the influence of our media, through the influence of pop culture, we're able to grab and grasp those themes without having to scare ourselves and without having to destroy our image of the world around us.
Dark pop culture, like Bo Burnham, even stuff like, you know, BoJack Horseman, the worst show alive, but, you know, BoJack Horseman, Archer, even these really heavy satirical shows that are just awful jokes in the sense of morally awful. They're educational. They're like, look, this exists and we're going to joke about it, but our jokes are going to make it clear that this is unhealthy. Like Rick and Morty, everyone knows that Rick is unhealthy in his alcoholism. It's funny as, but it's educational, you know, and people look at like video games and shows, they're going, it's going to teach our kids to drink, it's going to teach them to bully. Kids are going to learn that sooner or later. We have a minimum drinking age, so when kids turn 18, they learn about drinking, or when they turn 21 if you're in America. You know, kids are gonna play video games. You can't shelter them. So if they're gonna be a bad person, at least they can watch a show which doesn't hide that it's bad. If anything, it just exposes that it happens.
The problem doesn't lie in pop culture becoming dark. I don't think that's what's influencing young people. I think it's the fact that we're exposed much more to the real darkness of the world that we live in.
The dark side of pop culture does deal with death, language, mental health, gratuitous violence, rape. It deals with all sorts of dark themes and matters. To do a completely different comparison, Nicki Minaj, Anaconda, by this point I believe everyone has seen it. It's just bubbly booty popping in your face. It's there, it's right in your face, and hey, we're here to have a good time. And there's so much sexualized images, like what the lyrics are about.
Yeah, he love this fat ass. Yeah, this one is for my bitches with a fat ass in the fucking club. I said, with my fat ass big bitches in the club. Fuck the skinny bitches, fuck the skinny bitches in the club. I wanna see all the big fat ass bitches in the motherfucking club. Fuck you if you skinny bitches, what?
I remember being at a gig and it was cold, it was winter, I was wearing a long sleeve t-shirt and jeans. And one of the guys in the audience yelled at me, what did he say? It's like, take it off, love, or something. And that, I guess, really drove home, I guess, the fact that in order to be successful, women have to be sexualized. It's really difficult to find success in the media without being really sexed up. And I think that in itself is dark. I think while sexualization of women in the media might not be the same kind of really in-your-face darkness as talking about suicide or something else, murder like in Dexter, it's a really dark, sinister undertone that we see.
What makes you make me feel like a woman?
Maybe we don't even recognize entirely that it's a bad thing when we're seeing it, but it's a dark thing that we're being exposed to that and that we're perpetuating that.
Pop culture is pretty much all around us, and I think in some aspects it's really good, but then there are also times when it can really have a negative impact on us.
There are people already who are making jokes about how Ariana Grande's concert was so good that it blew people away, and that's horrible, but in an uncomfortable way it's funny.
People have already taken that and memed it to hell.
This meme is obviously about the recent bombing in Manchester. Some of you guys may think this is too soon, but the internet is a place of dark humor. The dank memers have to jump on any horrible events as soon as possible to get the darkest and dankest memes.
And it's just gone in a very sad direction of taking like 22 people and 50 people who have been injured or died in that and just blown it out of proportion and just made as a joke or just straight up ridicule.
The reason I think that people joke about it is because making light of that terrible thing makes it easier to cope with.
I think the reason that depression jokes and things like that came about probably came from not such an awful place. I think it more came from people who have suffered from this illness or suffer from it and have found themselves in a position where they use humor as a coping mechanism. And so they grapple with their illness by spreading humor and spreading it to other people with similar problems. But then the issue is people who don't have these problems then get their hands on it. And that's when the corruption begins. It stops just being a dark humor. It becomes a dark, twisted humor that no longer belongs in the hands of those that it should be. Similar to people with autism, because apparently now that is also a massive joke in pop culture. Just calling people autistic. Not only is it a gross oversimplification, it's also unfair to people who live with these disabilities and are trying to overcome them. But at every level of their pop culture, they get pushed back and pushed back and pushed back by people who think that they're just making a joke. And so we've got this pop culture that's telling us that it's perfectly okay to make these dark jokes. But then the people that are getting targeted by these dark jokes are being pushed down because people don't realize that it's such a difficult issue. People forget that they're not just joking about words, they're joking about lives and about human souls and dignity.
Pop culture evolved because our parents grew up in a generation in which they couldn't say this or that, but they could say really offensive things if they meant it in a derogatory manner, whereas now we say the same offensive things, but as jokes, which I guess on one hand is reappropriating, but also like it exists because we grew up under the same people that say, no, you can't say this. So when we had the World Wide Web come into play, suddenly it turned into this whole other thing where we could have anonymous accounts, we could have accounts on multiple social media platforms, and our parents and our grandparents, our relatives, they never had to find out about it. So we can say whatever we want, and it takes away like the idea of being accountable for your actions, but also it takes away that overbearing presence that older generations have, because we grow up less under our parents and more under people that we don't know that hide behind an icon on a screen.
I think the reason that, I don't know, the youth of today probably enjoys dark humor and dark memes is because, you know, we have to make light of it somehow.
Pop culture, I don't think, can be defined as either good or bad.
It's all over the place, and that's what I think pop culture really is. Just a bunch of random shit.
It's not being bad because it's become so dark and it's twisting these already sad things, and it's not all good either because it's educating the masses about the darker sides of our world. It's simply a mirror being held up to us as a society and showing us this is who you are, this is what you have become. Assess it and decide whether this is where you want to be or if this is something that you want to change. Recognize this in yourself and in the people around you, and choose a world and a future that you can believe in, and watch the pop culture change with it.